Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the tricks of the trade that help luxury brands persuade you to buy their products. We're going to look at the practices, the psychology, and even why being treated badly by a brand is a surefire way to make you even more likely to part with your cash. Before we get into the actual techniques these brands use, first we need to understand more about the challenges they face, aka us. We're the byproduct of some 200,000 years of human evolution, and that's slow going. What it means is we've become finely tuned for surviving the natural environment, built bigger and stronger and cleverer than our evolutionary counterparts. But there's a problem. The rate of change of technology, and in particular social infrastructure, has given humanity the ability to create things it doesn't fully understand. Even more scary is our ability to categorize pattern behavior and direct it into something of a playbook to predict the thinking of the average Joe. We all think we're unique, beautiful snowflakes, but in reality we're all simpletons at the behest of our squishy animal brains. It starts, really, with the endowment effect. You have money. It's yours. You earned it. You're not going to hand it over willy-nilly. If you do, the thing you're getting for it has to fulfill your aversion to loss, i.e. be a worthwhile trade in exchange for the safety of holding onto your cash. During the COVID boom, when watches held value or even gained it, people were far more willing to take a risk knowing that the reward could greatly outstrip it. Prospect theory demonstrates how we value the things we have greater than the things we don't. The risk of losing $100 to maybe gain $110 is too great a risk to compensate for our loss aversion. The $100 we have is worth more to us than the $110 we could have. If the opportunity increased to $1,000, however, we're more likely to risk that initial $100 to get it. See how much more appealing that sounds. You're probably mentally reaching into your wallet to pull out the $100 right now. But buying a luxury item isn't a straight gamble. There are a number of less objective factors at play, and all of them have to face up against a series of friction factors that will prevent us from making the leap. Those factors include time, such as the time it takes to research the product, to go to the shop to look at it, etc. Money, the actual cost of the product. Physical effort, particularly with regards to earning the money and going to a physical location to spend it. Mental effort, particularly with regards to the psychological hurdles of persuading yourself to make that big spend. Social deviance, such as buying into a niche product or spending more than your social group would find normal, can prevent an exchange. And lastly, routine fit, where the entire process doesn't align with our day-to-day actions. We go through a decision-making process related to those friction factors with pretty much everything. When you're in bed all comfortable at 4 AM and you need the bathroom, you weigh up many of those factors in the decision to stick or twist. In the case of social deviance, other users of the bed may find it strange if you emptied your bladder into the mattress, and that will likely inform the final decision. Ultimately, brands are looking to hook new consumers in with an appealing product, create a habit of buying that product to normalize it, and turn that habit into a hobby where the repeated engagement becomes a rewarding experience anticipated in advance, and a psychological tool to be used in the fight with the fear of boredom. Let's see how they do it. Before I give away all the techniques, if you want to support me making videos like this, then I'd love it if you checked out some of my merch in the link below, including this lovely sweatshirt to wear when you've bought your next watch and you're feeling particularly humbled and blessed. Thanks very much. Some of these tactics, as we'll see later on, are more like tricks, gotchas that get consumers sticking to a brand or product and coming back for more. But there's also, especially at higher price points, a whole lot of considered effort that needs to be made on the part of the brand in order to stick the landing. It's not the work of a moment, particularly to build perhaps the most important factor: storytelling. A history, a reason, a person, and a challenge are factored into a narrative arc that brings credibility to what a brand does, evoking trust and sentiment for that brand that far outweighs the cold persuasion of logic. We are more inclined to be influenced by an appeal to emotion than an appeal to logic, as politics so often demonstrates. Why is that? Because emotion, what is often termed as a gut feeling, is less energy intensive than considering all the facts. A group of individuals, each with their own gut feeling, will reach a conclusion more efficiently than the individuals working through every single factor in isolation. Although this only works when that group has different gut reactions. I wonder how social marketing and digital echo chambers might be able to manipulate that particular evolutionary trait. This behavior is broken down into several triggers. One is neural coupling, where emotive storytelling is reflected by our own emotions, where we feel connected and invested in the story. That's why business leaders are most often considered sociopaths, because they find themselves unburdened by sympathy and are therefore more capable of making cutthroat decisions. Narrative transportation, by way of neural coupling, creates a level of immersion that allows the recipient to suspend their disbelief, making them more likely to change their way of thinking and behaving. Not to mention that storytelling is better reflected through retention, a state of memory encoding that is more sticky than a boring old list of facts. We like structure, we like patterns, and most importantly, we like to identify with success and achievement. Brands that can tell their own story of success and achievement will be more likely to relate to our own self-narratives. The biggest hurdle to purchasing an expensive watch is, well, the expense. And we're all very likely, should we choose watch collecting as our hobby, to end up spending relatively more on a watch than we would consider for anything else. This is because of a process called anchoring, whereby we determine our value of something based on a relative price point. So if a loaf of bread costs a few dollars and we see one advertised at 10 times more, we would judge it to be expensive. Likewise, if we saw one for just 10 cents, we would be considering that a bargain. We've determined this without any consideration or understanding of how much it costs to make a loaf of bread, and that's because anchoring is entirely arbitrary. An experiment was conducted where participants were required to multiply the numbers 1 through 8, with half the participants given the numbers listed sequentially and the others in reverse, i.e. 8 through to 1. Neither group was given enough time to properly work out the sum, and so estimation was required. The groups whose sum started with the lower number estimated a lower result, and the group with a higher one, a higher result. In addition, a higher priced item also benefits from an association of prestige and is assumed to be of a higher quality. That's the gut feeling in action again, making decisions based on limited evidence rather than expending energy determining the truth for ourselves. Higher price is also a shortcut to aspiration, as fewer people can make the same expenditure, and so therefore the product becomes associated with higher status and success. The best luxury brands have what's known as an iconic product strategy, where one or a few of the products in their catalogue are associated with a level of status that exceeds the others, almost making them a brand unto themselves. These products are often subject to higher prices, higher resale value, and enormous waitlists, with only the highest of social status able to procure one. It is the ultimate variation of the thrill of the chase, one that not only fulfills a person's own need for stimulation, but also a broader tribalistic fulfillment that gives identity and status amongst peers. The iconic product becomes a culturally important marker that reaches almost mythical status, and that makes it a symbol for something bigger and more important than just itself. Iconic products don't necessarily have to be expensive. Counterculture icons are often affordable and freely available. It's the association and meaning that drives up the desirability of that thing amongst a social group and becomes an identifier of association with that way of thinking and socio-political alignment. An object may deliver a sense of pride, or defiance, or even nostalgia, all social emotions that connect us in some way with the people around us. A very prominent tactic used in the luxury industry is scarcity and exclusivity. Whilst those sound basically the same, there's a subtlety that's especially valuable for higher priced objects associated with social status. Scarcity in itself suggests the unavailability of something, but exclusivity in conjunction with scarcity suggests a bias of that limited availability towards a certain group. That could be determined financially, but also geographically, demographically, or based on loyalty. The luxury industry targets all of the above when it comes to scarcity through exclusivity, offering selective distribution through certain prestigious locations, brand-only boutiques, and even boutique-exclusive variants. The most exclusive items can not only demonstrate access to typically unattainable pieces and esteemed venues and associations, but also on the secondary market, where prices far outstrip primary, a wanton disinterest in the price of things. This differentiates the social badging between primary and secondary customers as established and connected versus a brute force outsider. Much of this desire to obtain rare, hard-to-get objects is driven by the IKEA effect, where the investment of effort attributes a deeper connection with the end result. Something easily procured is not as rewarding as one that took a more concerted endeavor to get, and so jumping through hoops will inevitably lead to a higher association of value. In an experiment where one group was required to build an object, whereas the other observed the object in its completed state, the former group estimated a value of over 50% higher. Excuse me while I take a moment to say a big thank you to my wonderful and supportive Patreons who join me over on Patreon for live chats, exclusive videos, and general watch nonsense. If you'd like to join them, you'll find a link in the description below. Thank you. Many people would like to think they're immune to typical marketing techniques, and for them the creation of anti-marketing takes its place, empowering consumer rebellion against the norms of tradition. Reverse psychology is the most popularized form of anti-marketing, where a brand acknowledges its product isn't for everyone, with the intention of isolating a tribalistic group that perceives itself to be in some way superior. Increasing aversion to big corporations and awareness of marketing tactics is also seeing brands adopt a more humble and relatable approach that connects through emotion and authenticity over big budget hype and polish. A certain self-deprecating rawness is effective especially amongst younger consumers, who are particularly attuned to marketing behaviors. Mysterious, ironic, and even meta campaigns feel fresh and unusual, triggering intrigue and engagement from a marketing-saturated community. Anti-marketing also trends towards our first instance of customer mistreatment, although this is by far the most inoffensive version of it. Never offering discounts, maintaining a stoic, unfaltering level of self-confidence is reflected in consumer perception of that brand. It puts the power in the brand's hands and not ours, making it a perceived seller's market and not a buyer's, increasing desirability. A case study where a brand increased its prices during the Black Friday sales and generated higher revenue demonstrates the anti-marketing approach in action. It's rare that luxury brands offer just one optimized version for each variation of product. Given that the practical usage of these particular products, watches, is typically low on the customer's list of requirements, it makes more sense to offer variations on a theme instead of a single perfect solution. The production of collectible sets engages our need for completion, where we're more inclined to remember incomplete tasks better than completed ones. By presenting a sense of unfinished business, luxury brands can compel us to complete a collection of things once we've started, to fulfill the need to free our conscious brain of that task yet to be completed. By entering consumers in at the lower end of the collectible set, where affordability and availability are more commonplace, behavioral reinforcement is established by creating a reward system based on operant conditioning, where buyer behavior is strengthened through consequences. Behavior is increased through reward and decreased through punishment in order to achieve the brand's desired outcome. Unpredictable reward is also more likely to reinforce behavior than predictable, with a variable ratio producing more persistent repetition in consumer behavior. Knowing what you're going to get just isn't as exciting as a randomness factor, where the reward feels greater in comparison to a preconceived benchmark of failure. This gamification of progress requires effort and risk, which can in turn yield a feeling of satisfying progression. The last benefit of collectible sets within luxury brands, with respect to pursuing a rarer item in that set, is the sunk cost fallacy, where we're more inclined to keep on pushing forwards because we don't want our investment so far to be lost for good. Our aversion to loss will actually encourage us to risk further loss in the face of guaranteeing what's already lost. There's always hope. As we've discovered, so much of the perception of a brand is based around how what's around it is also perceived. And so taking control of the entire ecosystem via a group architecture gives further control of how we think and feel about particular brand placements. Two competing brands may cause each other more harm working in contention than working together. So much so that agencies preventing monopolistic collusion exist for the betterment of consumers. The grey area of this ruling is with group brands that all exist seemingly in competition, but under the umbrella of single ownership. These brands can compete across price, style, capability, whatever, building a framework of perception in order to create a predetermined conclusion. There's the obvious benefit of selling more types of product to more types of people, and having more opportunities to compete with opposing brands or groups. But where the real power lies in group architecture is in having a large enough controlling stake in the industry to change an overall consumer narrative. Associating one well-established brand with a newer, less-known brand can fast-track it to success. That's not just in terms of collaboration, but even placement in a shop window to psychologically level the two brands. Value can even be reinforced across price points through varying group brands by establishing a baseline for a certain set of specifications that allows a more expensive brand to justify higher costs. Once again, we see anchoring at play to create a mindset of acceptability for certain price points. Of course, too many options within a group can create issues. The paradox of choice is a paralyzing effect that prevents consumers making any decision at all. Where some choice gives consumers a greater sense of agency in their decision, too much can overwhelm and lead to no decision at all. Perhaps the most tactical use of brands within a group is as a fighter or flanker brand. This is a targeted approach against an opposing brand to force it to make a play it hadn't intended, such as lowering its prices. This is often reactive, either to competitor positioning or global market factors, a self-regulating decision triggered by loss of custom to a competitor. Fighter brands can also be used proactively by market leaders to deflect a competitor's attack on value. The established brand can continue to retail its leading product at a premium price, whilst also competing against the value options with a secondary brand alongside it. Perhaps where that competing brand had intended to draw the market leader's prices down, it then finds itself either needing to push its prices up to match the market leader, or down to compete with the new secondary fighter brand. This can create a race to the bottom where both the fighter brand and market competitor end up destroying themselves in a fruitless pursuit of ultimate value, leaving the market leader uncontested entirely. Either way, if properly executed, the fighter brand can prove to make the group untouchable by any tactic, especially in the world of luxury where innovation and specification are seldom market shifters. Successful luxury brands understand that they can't build a reputation entirely on their own, and so there are several ways to use association to bring a level of acceptability from us, the buying public. The first is endorsement, the approval and recommendation of the brand and its products by someone of appropriate social standing. It's important for the brand to find an ideal match for their endorsement, with the luxury industry often seen making the mistake of misjudging who its most likely clients respect and admire. Beyond social reach, reputation is the most important factor of endorsement. Endorsement must feel genuine in order to reach its proper potential, and with improper care can even be detrimental to a brand. Beyond just the professional recommendation of a well-known user of this type of product, for the luxury industry, where functionality is low on the priorities of importance, social proof is the target for a successful endorsement. Also known as informational social influence, social proof is a phenomenon whereby we copy the actions of others when choosing how to behave. This is also called herd behavior, although with the endorsement of a well-known personality, this conformity can originate from a single source rather than a broader social pattern. A strong driver of social proof is uncertainty. As we've seen from our aversion to loss, we're sooner more likely to not make a decision than risk a bad one. And mimicking the decisions of a socially accepted figurehead is a shortcut to achieving low-risk decision-making, an acceptance from our social peers. It aligns with several other principles of persuasion, including commitment, authority, and liking. Experiments have demonstrated how participants are likely to change their mind about something when a social leader makes a differing decision. The other form of external reputation building is through sponsorship of activities or events the brand feels it should be associated with. The success and reputation of those activities or events is determined in the first place by social interaction, a framework of society that provides a reference for behavior and communication. If people perceived to be the brand's best opportunity for conversion like something, then an association with that something is likely a good association to have. Sponsorship especially takes advantage of labeling theory, which associates the product with the practice to create a perception that X type of person likes Y type of product. The formulation of that behavior results in the opposing thought that someone can't be a true X type of person if they don't have Y type of product. Whilst labeling is typically considered to cause social separation and animosity between groups, as well as influencing the predetermination of a conclusion, with the example of youth being labelled as criminals shaping their self-perception and reinforcing that outcome. In the case of the luxury industry, this social hierarchy is a benefit to the reputation and desirability of its product. Association with well-established social hierarchies is a fast-track approach to that tribalistic desirability. Unusually, the two biggest stereotypes of the luxury experience are completely contradictory. One is a high-level doting display of favoritism and affection, and the other is the complete opposite, a snobbish rejection and feeling of disassociation. The first, an experience of being waited upon hand and foot, isn't difficult to understand the immediate value of. A clear demonstration of social ranking by the virtue of having other people serve your every need. Brands at the highest end of luxury will seek to accommodate any requirement of their clientele, even at great expense to themselves, to earn the sale. It's why casinos put high rollers up in penthouse suites at entirely no cost, making the experience for that customer one of value and status. But there's a little more nuance to it than outright sycophancy. Reciprocity is the social norm of responding to a behavior with a similar behavior. And in the case of generosity, the response is usually generosity in return. Game theory demonstrates that kindness yields better results overall than abuse, albeit only in the longer term. For luxury brands seeking to create extended relationships with clients for repeated sales, a generous approach more often yields generous rewards. This reciprocity is manifested in both the physical, a glass of champagne, a beautiful store, a gift with purchase, and the emotional, celebrating a birthday, remembering a partner's name, personalizing the experience. Emotional reciprocity is more effective as it relates to our feelings rather than to logic, creating a more personal and authentic bond. Before we discover how brands mistreat you to get your money, please do take a moment to like the video and subscribe as well to let me know you're enjoying it. Also, I'd be interested to know whereabouts in the world you're from and if you've had a bad luxury experience. Or perhaps if you're aware of examples of any of these practices we've spoken about today in action. Let me know in the comments below. In some circumstances, however, it's possible to reverse this thinking entirely and create a greater yield of return through what's known as the velvet rope strategy, in creating barriers to entry that are, both literally and figuratively, designed to generate a fear of missing out. We've seen this already with operant conditioning and unpredictable reward, where effort and risk on the part of the consumer generate a greater sense of personal advantage than by getting what they want without the investment of work. But what if this is pushed to its highest degree, where not only passive barriers exist to make the process harder, but active ones that push back and make us feel like we don't even belong? It's the go-to practice of any trendy nightclub or restaurant. If you're not on the list, you don't get in. And to get on the list, you're going to have to accommodate some pretty demeaning requests. To obtain the product at the end of this bizarre trial puts us in the rare and exclusive position of someone who's met some incredibly specific requirements. For some, this creates an intangible importance, such as the hazing rituals often present at the entry to an elite club. For others, it's off-putting and entirely unappealing. That means the velvet rope strategy only works when the product is already extremely desirable. This forces brands employing the fully formed version of the velvet rope strategy to pay careful attention to supply and demand, and to not create an oversupply situation that entirely kills the balance. It also fails to generate any kind of brand loyalty, since as soon as the desirability of the product wanes, customers will seek a better experience elsewhere. Where the reciprocity approach has the opportunity to weather the storm through periods of oversupply, the velvet rope strategy can create a hard fall-off of sales success if it's not carefully managed. The most effective examples of this in action utilize a ratio of supply and demand in factors of thousands, if not tens of thousands. That's why, as per game theory, a kinder approach usually lends itself to a better long-term yield. It doesn't preclude an adaptive version of the velvet rope strategy, but one that creates a certain sense of exclusivity without being hostile and unfriendly. Another important factor of game theory is that, whilst being kind, you can't be a pushover. And so that requires luxury brands to maintain some level of resistance as a barrier to entry. Getting it right is what the very best brands are capable of, with the optimal approach allowing the holy grail of both exclusivity and volume. So what does this all mean exactly? Should we stop buying luxury watches? Well, I'm not. These evolutionary risk-reward dopamine addiction factors exist to help us survive an environment that doesn't itself exist anymore. And so in the pursuit of having some kind of fulfillment and purpose, there's a healthy level of modern repurposed achievement that stops us feeling like it's all just a matter of going through the motions. A luxury watch isn't going to change your life, but it can give you a little tickle along the way. Thanks for watching.